Chapter 17, The Children of Three Worlds. The first integrated school opened 6 months later in a carefully chosen location, a floating city anchored between the territories of all three species, accessible to everyone but belonging to no single group. John stood in the main classroom, watching as young beings from 3 different evolutionary paths took their first tentative steps toward understanding each other. The Cybertan children were small versions of their parents, their metallic skin patterns simpler but no less beautiful. They communicated through rapid data exchanges that looked like choreographed light shows, their analytical minds already beginning to grasp concepts that would challenge adult humans. The young Vortak were less intimidating than their elders, their volcanic armor not yet fully developed, but they still radiated an energy that made the other children give them respectful space. They moved with inherent grace despite their size, and their deep voices carried surprising gentleness when they spoke to their smaller classmates. The Skeltar juveniles were perhaps the most alien, their forms constantly shifting between different configurations as they explored their environment. Their bioluminescent patterns were more spontaneous than adults, flashing with pure emotion rather than the controlled communication displays of maturity. Initial observations are promising, reported Dr. Lyron Flux, the Cybertan education specialist who served as the school's primary administrator. The children show remarkable adaptability. Natural curiosity overrides the cultural prejudices that limit adult interactions. John nodded, watching as a young Vortak carefully helped a smaller Cybertan reach a high shelf, while a Skeltar juvenile translated between them using newly learned gesture speak. Children haven't had time to develop the deep-seated fears that drive adult conflicts. They see differences as interesting rather than threatening. But the school's success had come at a cost. Purist groups from all three species had protested its opening, some peacefully, others with increasing violence. Security had to be upgraded twice after attempted sabotage, and several families had withdrawn their children under pressure from extremist neighbors. The resistance is stronger than we anticipated, ZYX admitted during one of their security briefings. Purist propaganda claims that integrated education will destroy species identity, creating a generation of culturally confused weaklings who belong to no one. Fear of change, John observed. Every major social transformation faces resistance from those who benefit from the old system or who genuinely believe that tradition equals survival. Current flows through deep wisdom's patterns flickered with what John had learned to recognize as deep concern. The Depths Walkers have issued formal condemnation of the integration programs. They call them surface corruption and threaten to sever all ties with Skeltar who participate. Krax's response was predictably aggressive. Let them retreat to their deep holes. Those who lack courage to face change deserve to be left behind. It's not that simple, John cautioned. The Depths Walkers control significant resources and territory. If they withdraw from the Alliance completely, it weakens everyone's position. We need to find ways to address their concerns without abandoning the integration process. The solution, when it came, was suggested by an unexpected source, the children themselves. During a routine class project about water management systems, the young students had designed a proposal for floating gardens that could exist at various depths, allowing Skeltar to maintain their deep water lifestyle while still participating in surface cooperation. They don't see the divisions that limit adult thinking, Dr. Lyron Flux explained as she presented the children's project to the Diplomatic Council. To them, depth is just another environmental factor to accommodate, like temperature or atmospheric pressure. The floating garden concept evolved into something much larger, multi-level communities that existed throughout the water column, from surface platforms down to abyssal depths. Skeltar could maintain their traditional deep water existence while still interacting with surface dwellers through intermediate levels. But implementing such communities required resources and cooperation on a scale that tested the limits of the fragile alliance. Construction would take years, requiring technologies from all three species and sustained political will despite continued extremist opposition. The portal research is complete, ZYX announced during one of their planning sessions, his words falling into the room like stones into still water. We can attempt to send you home whenever you choose. John felt his heart stop for a moment. He had known this day was coming, but somehow it still caught him unprepared. The portal technology was ready. Earth was within reach again. What are the risks? He asked, buying time to process the implications. Significant, current flows through. Deep Wisdom replied honestly. The quantum energies involved are immense. There is perhaps a 60% chance of successful transport, a 30% chance of arrival in the wrong location or time period, and a 10% chance of dissolution. Not great odds, John observed. But they will only improve marginally with additional research, ZYX added. The fundamental limitations are imposed by the universe itself, not our understanding of the technology. John looked around at the beings who had become his closest friends and allies. Leaving men abandoning them at a crucial moment in their civilization's development. Staying men accepting that he would never see Earth again, never know what had happened to the life he had left behind. How long do I have to decide? He asked. The portal window will remain stable for approximately 72 hours once activated, current flows through. Deep Wisdom explained. After that, the quantum fluctuations become too unpredictable for safe transport. 72 hours to choose between two worlds, two lives, two completely different definitions of home. John realized that the next 3 days would determine not just his own future, but possibly the fate of 3 civilizations still struggling to learn how to coexist. Chapter 18, The Weight of Worlds. John spent the first day of his deadline walking through the integrated communities that had sprung up across Kepler-Zendara in the months since the school's opening. Each settlement was a small miracle of cooperation, Cybertan quantum gardens growing alongside Vorthack thermal workshops, while Skeltar biopools provided water purification for everyone. In the children's play areas, young beings from 3 species invented games that their parents couldn't have imagined. A Vorthack child teaching Cybertan youngsters how to create sculptures from heated metal. A Skeltar juvenile showing others how to communicate through bioluminescent patterns. A Cybertan child helping others solve complex puzzles through shared data processing. They make it look so easy, John murmured to himself, watching as the children seamlessly switched between different communication methods and social protocols. Because for them, it is easy, Dr. Lyrenflux said, joining him at the observation platform. They don't carry the weight of historical trauma that burdens adult interactions. To them, cooperation is simply the natural way to accomplish goals. John nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, wrestling with the impossible choice before him. Earth represented everything familiar, his own species, his culture, the life he had trained for since childhood. But it was also a world he had left months ago, where his disappearance had probably been written off as another space accident. Kepler-Zendara offered something else entirely, a chance to help shape the future of 3 civilizations, to be part of something unprecedented in galactic history. But it meant permanent exile from everything he had ever known. Dr. Lyrenflux, he said finally, what happens to the integration programs if I leave? The Cybertan's patterns shifted to indicate careful consideration. The programs will continue, but the symbolism of your departure will be significant. Extremist groups will claim that even the architect of cooperation eventually abandoned the project. It will make our work more difficult. And if I stay? Then you become permanently invested in our success. Your presence validates the integration process in ways that our own advocacy cannot. But, she added with characteristic Cybertan honesty, that is not sufficient reason to sacrifice your own desires. John spent the second day reviewing intelligence reports about the growing extremist threats. The purist movements had evolved from isolated protest groups into organized networks capable of coordinated attacks. 3 more joint facilities had been sabotaged in the past month, and intercepted communications suggested that larger operations were being planned. They're not just random vandalism anymore, Krax reported grimly. These are strategic strikes designed to cripple the integration infrastructure. The attacks target choke points, transportation hubs, communication relays, resource distribution centers. ZYX's analysis was even more troubling. Pattern recognition suggests a coordinating intelligence behind the attacks. The tactical sophistication exceeds what we would expect from loosely organized extremist cells. You think someone is organizing them? John asked. Or something, current flows through deep wisdom interjected, its patterns cycling through colors that indicated deep unease. Some of the intercepted communications contain references to the returning shadows and the eternal purpose. The language suggests influence from entities that transcend individual species concerns. The implications were chilling. If the ethereals, or beings like them, were already working to destabilize the Alliance, then John's departure could trigger the final collapse of everything they had built. The extremist movements might be pawns in a larger game, just as the original conflicts had been manipulated for eons. But staying to fight an enemy that might not even exist yet seemed like a poor reason to abandon his own species forever. On the third day, John visited the portal facility where the quantum engineers were making final preparations for the transport attempt. The device was magnificent in its complexity, a fusion of technologies from all three species that created a stable tear in spacetime itself. The portal will remain active for exactly 71 hours and 43 minutes, the chief engineer reported. After that, quantum degradation makes the passage too dangerous to attempt. John stared into the swirling vortex of energy that could carry him home, or destroy him completely. The choice that had seemed impossible was becoming clearer with each passing hour. Earth would continue without him. Humanity would reach for the stars eventually, but it would take generations or centuries. His absence wouldn't change the fundamental trajectory of human development. But Kepler-Zendara stood at a crucial crossroads. The next few years would determine whether three ancient species could overcome their differences to face whatever threats the galaxy might throw at them. His presence might tip the balance towards success, while his absence could signal the beginning of renewed conflict. "I need to record a message," John said finally. "Something to send through the portal even if I don't go myself." The message he recorded was simple but heartfelt, an explanation of what had happened to him, what he had found among the stars, and why he had chosen to stay. He included technical data about the portal technology, coordinates for Kepler-Zendara, and a warning about the ethereals and other manipulative entities that might threaten Earth in the future. As the final hours of the portal window ticked away, John stood with his friends watching the swirling vortex that represented his last chance to go home. When the countdown reached 0 and the portal collapsed without him passing through it, he felt a mixture of loss and profound relief. He was home. Not the home of his birth, but the home he had chosen, a world where three impossible species were learning to become something greater than the sum of their parts. Chapter 19, The Return of Shadows. 2 years after John's decision to remain on Kepler-Zendara, the integrated communities had grown into a network spanning the entire planet. The floating cities housed millions of beings from all three species, their children growing up trilingual and tricultural in ways that would have been unimaginable to previous generations. But success brought new dangers. The first sign of trouble came from the deep space monitoring stations that Cybertan scientists had established around the system's perimeter. Quantum disturbances indicated incoming portal activity, not the random fluctuations of natural phenomena, but the controlled patterns of deliberately open gateways. 7 distinct portal signatures, reported Dr. Keth Prime, the station's chief observer. Each one larger and more stable than anything in our databases. Whatever is coming through possesses portal technology far superior to our own. John felt a chill as he reviewed the sensor data. How long until arrival? Based on current transit speeds, approximately 14 hours. But John Human, the Cybertan's patterns shifted to indicate extreme concern. The energy signatures are consistent with ethereal technology. They have returned, and they have brought reinforcements. The emergency council session that followed was unlike any John had experienced during his time on Kepler-Zendara. Representatives from all three species arrived within hours, their faces, or equivalent expressions, grim with the understanding that everything they had built was about to be tested. 7 ethereal vessels, War Chieftain Crack stated bluntly. Our combined fleets might match 1 or 2 of them in direct combat, but 7 represents overwhelming force. Current flows through Deep Wisdom's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with rapid calculations. Direct confrontation would be suicide. We must consider alternative strategies, evacuation, hiding, or perhaps negotiation. No, John said firmly, his voice carrying the authority he had earned through years of successful diplomacy. Running or hiding just delays the inevitable. And negotiating with beings that view us as livestock is pointless. We fight, but we fight smart. ZYX's analytical mind immediately began processing tactical possibilities. Define smart, John. Human. The conventional military wisdom suggests that overwhelming force can only be countered with guerrilla tactics or asymmetrical warfare. John had been thinking about this possibility for months, ever since the first intelligence reports about organized extremist activities. The ethereals expect to find the same divided, conflicted civilizations they left behind. They're counting on being able to manipulate us against each other just like before. What if we give them something they can't manipulate? Meaning what? Krax demanded. Unity, John replied simply. Not just political cooperation, but genuine integration at every level. If our three species truly become one people with shared values and goals, there's nothing for the ethereals to exploit. Current flows through deep wisdom's patterns shifted to indicate skepticism. Such integration would require abandoning millennia of cultural identity. Many would view it as a form of extinction. Not abandoning, evolving, John corrected. Taking the best of each culture and creating something new. The children in our integrated schools are already doing it naturally. The debate that followed was intense, touching on fundamental questions of identity, survival, and the price of peace. But as reports continued to arrive about the approaching ethereal fleet, the options became increasingly clear. They could face the returning manipulators as three separate species, and be destroyed or enslaved as they had been for millennia. Or they could attempt something unprecedented in galactic history, the voluntary merger of three distinct civilizations into a single, integrated people. The purist movements will never accept such a proposal, ZYX warned. They will see it as the ultimate betrayal of everything they believe in. Then we'll have to convince them, John replied. Or prepare to fight on two fronts simultaneously. Krax's laugh was grim but determined. You ask us to gamble everything on an untested theory, void spawn. But I have seen what cooperation can accomplish. If unity can defeat the shadow manipulators, then let us forge unity in the fires of necessity. The next 12 hours were a whirlwind of activity as emergency integration protocols were activated across the planet. Voluntary merger centers opened in every major settlement, offering citizens of all three species the opportunity to join the new unified civilization. The response was overwhelming. Millions of beings stepped forward to participate in the greatest social experiment in planetary history. But not everyone embraced the change. Reports flooded in of purist attacks on integration facilities, attempts to sabotage the merger process, and organized resistance movements declaring independence from what they called species suicide. The planet was fragmenting just as it needed to unite, and John realized that the battle for Kepler Zendara's future had already begun. As the ethereal fleet entered the outer system, their quantum wake disrupting communications and causing gravitational anomalies throughout the region, John stood on the command deck of Unity Station watching the approaching lights that represented either liberation or annihilation. Are we ready? He asked the assembled representatives of the new unified government. As ready as we can be in 12 hours, ZYX replied, his patterns now displaying the complex harmonics that marked him as a citizen of the integrated civilization rather than purely cybertan. Whether readiness is sufficient remains to be seen. The first shots of the battle would be fired within hours, but John knew that the real war had already begun, not just against the returning ethereals, but against the forces of division and hatred that threatened to tear apart everything they had built from within. Chapter 20, Unity in the Stars. The ethereal fleet arrived in perfect formation, 7 massive vessels that dwarfed anything in the combined defense forces of Kepler Zendara. But as they took position around the planet, something unprecedented happened. They hesitated. John watched from Unity Station's command center as the ethereal ships held their positions without attacking, their energy signatures fluctuating in patterns that suggested confusion or uncertainty. They're scanning the planet, reported Dr. Keth Prime, his quantum sensors tracking the alien probe beams. But the readings they're getting don't match their expectations. What do you mean? John asked. The quantum resonance patterns of population centers show unified harmonics rather than the conflicted energy signatures they fed on before. From their perspective, the planet appears to have lost its primary value as an energy source. On the main display, a communication channel opened, filling the command center with the familiar mental pressure of ethereal telepathy. But this time, the alien thoughts carried notes of frustration and bewilderment rather than arrogant confidence. "What have you done?" The mental voice was filled with rage and incomprehension. "Where are the conflicts we cultivated? Where is the chaos that sustained our operations for millennia?" John stepped forward, knowing that this moment would determine the fate of two civilizations, the unified people of Kepler Zendara and his own distant humanity. "We evolved beyond your manipulations," he replied, his thoughts broadcast through the station's telepathic amplifiers. "Your attempts to divide us only taught us the value of unity." Impossible. The psychological profiles are comprehensive. Species integration at this level cannot occur naturally, it violates fundamental principles of evolutionary competition. "Maybe that's true for species that develop in isolation," John conceded. "But we had help. An outsider who showed us that our differences could be strengths rather than sources of conflict." The ethereal response came with a wave of psychic force that would have crushed individual minds, but the unified consciousness of the integrated population absorbed and dispersed it harmlessly. "Even unified, you remain primitive beings bound by physical law. We are energy incarnate, masters of quantum forces that predate your species' existence. Resistance is futile." The attack, when it came, was overwhelming: quantum disruptors that should have shattered planetary defenses, psychic weapons designed to drive entire populations insane, and energy drains that attempted to feed on the life force of every living being on the planet. But the ethereals had made a crucial miscalculation. Their weapons were designed to exploit the divisions and weaknesses of separate species. Against a truly unified civilization, the attacks found no purchase. The quantum disruptors were absorbed and redirected by Cybertan technology enhanced with Vorthack energy control and Skeltar bioadaptive systems. The psychic weapons shattered against minds that had learned to think in 3 different modes simultaneously. The energy drains found nothing to feed on because the population's life force was distributed through quantum-linked networks that no external force could penetrate. "Counterattack," John ordered, and the unified fleet responded with tactics that no single species could have imagined. Vorthack thermal lances powered by Cybertan quantum generators and guided by Skeltar bionavigation systems struck with precision that carved through ethereal shielding like paper. Ships that flowed like living organisms while maintaining the structural integrity of crystalline matrices and the raw power of controlled fusion. But the real weapon was something the ethereals couldn't comprehend: a population that genuinely fought as one, where individual sacrifice for collective survival wasn't just strategy but instinct. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, 2 ethereal vessels had been completely destroyed, 3 others severely damaged, and the remaining 2 in full retreat toward the edge of the system. "This is not possible," came the final transmission from the fleeing ethereals. "No species achieves true unity. The psychological barriers are insurmountable." "Maybe not for one species," John replied through the quantum communicators. "But we're something new. Something you never accounted for in your millennia of manipulation." As the ethereal ships vanished into portal space, leaving behind wreckage and the promise that others of their kind would eventually return, John felt a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. "Status report," he requested, settling into the command chair that had become his permanent position as coordinator of the unified government. "Casualties were minimal thanks to the distributed defense networks," ZYX reported, his patterns now showing the complex trispectral displays that marked citizens of the new civilization. "Purist resistance continues in isolated areas, but support for integration has increased dramatically since the ethereal attack. Current flows through Deep Wisdom's bioluminescence pulsed with satisfaction. Nothing unifies a population like an external threat that validates their choices. The holdout communities are requesting integration assistance at unprecedented rates." Krax's response was characteristically direct. "Let them come. Any who stood with us against the shadow manipulators deserve a place in our new civilization. As for those who aided the enemy, his meaning was clear without words. John looked out at the stars beyond Kepler-Zendara's atmosphere, knowing that somewhere among them, other ethereals were planning their return. But he also knew that they would find a very different world when they arrived, one where 3 species had become something greater than any of them could have achieved alone. In the months that followed, the integration process accelerated beyond all projections. Children who had grown up trilingual and tricultural became the leaders of communities where species identity mattered less than shared values and common goals. Technologies that had been hoarded for millennia became freely shared, creating innovations that surpassed anything any single civilization had achieved. And at the center of it all, John Martinez, former astronaut, accidental diplomat, and architect of the greatest social transformation in galactic history, continued to serve as the bridge between worlds, helping to guide a unified civilization toward a future that none of them could have imagined when he first crashed in a crystal forest under alien stars. The message probe he had sent through the portal before its collapse finally reached Earth, carrying warnings about the ethereals and proof that humanity's reach into the cosmos had already begun to change the galaxy itself. In time, when Earth's children reached the stars, they would find allies waiting, 3 species that had learned the value of unity from one lost astronaut who chose to make an alien world his home. The wormhole that had brought John to Kepler-Zendara might have been created by enemies seeking to sow chaos and discord. But like so many of the best human stories, it had become something unintended, a tale of hope, cooperation, and the power of individuals to change the course of civilizations. In the end, John realized he had found something among the stars that Earth couldn't have given him, the chance to help write the next chapter in the galaxy's history, one word at a time, one alliance at a time, one unified world at a time. The cosmos was vast and filled with dangers, but it was also filled with possibilities. And for the first time since his arrival through an impossible portal under the light of binary stars, John felt truly at home among the children of 3 worlds who had become one people reaching for the infinite. This story explores themes of cooperation, unity, and the power of individuals to effect change on a cosmic scale. Through John's journey from lost astronaut to galactic diplomat, we see how someone willing to bridge differences can help transform entire civilizations. The 100,000+ character narrative spans John's crash landing, first contact with the Cybertans, discovery of the manipulative ethereals, the forging of an unprecedented 3-species alliance, and ultimately the creation of a unified civilization capable of standing against cosmic threats. It's a tale of hope in the face of seemingly impossible odds, and the idea that unity, rather than division, represents the key to survival among the stars.